The next control we're going to look at is slider, which gives us this kind of functionality. Now, in this example, I've explicitly added a label that displays the current value of the slider. So the slider itself does not come with this label. So let's see how we can use a slider. Once again, starting with a stack layout, I'm going to add a slider first. And below that, I'm going to add a label to display the current value of the slider. And for that, I'm going to use binding. So text, I'm going to set this to binding. Source equals X reference. Now we need to give our slider an identifier. So X name, call it slider. Now back here, we set the path to value property. Now let's run the application. Now note the current value of the slider. You can see the slider represents a decimal number between 0 and 1. What if you want to change this range? We can use minimum and or maximum property. So I'm going to set minimum to 0 and maximum to 255. Run the application again. Now we have a slider between 0 and 255. But we still have a decimal number as the current value. What if we're interested in an integer? Wherever we consume this number, we need to cast it or format it as an integer. Because the minimum, maximum, and value properties of the slider are all double. So in this case, when displaying the current value of the slider, I'm going to format the current value. So remember string format? We set this to a standard C# string format. So curly braces, 0 representing the first argument, colon, and N0 for rendering an integer. Let's run the application again. Okay, look. Now we have an integer between 0 and 255. What if you want to change this range again and, let's say, set the minimum to 10? So here I'm going to set minimum to 10. But now if I launch the application, it's going to crash. Why? Because by default, minimum is 0 and maximum is 1. So when XAML parser parses this XAML file, as it sets the minimum property of the slider object to 10, validation fails. Because minimum, which is 10, becomes greater than maximum, which is 1. So in that case, we need to swap the order. We need to set the maximum first to open up the range, and then we set the minimum. We can also optionally set the current value, let's say 50. So the order you set these properties is important. You need to set them in an order that validation doesn't fail. Let's run the application again. And here's the result. The current value is 50, and minimum is 10, and maximum is 255. Now, sliders also have an event called value changed. So if you want to do something as the value changes, you can handle this event. And here, our event args has two properties. One is the new value, and the other is the old value. Next, we're going to look at stepper.